welcome everyone to another episode of the Jonathan Project Podcast, where iron is sharpening iron. And we take the biblical example from Jonathan and his friend David as the inspiration for our podcast, where we help men navigate the complexities of the world around them. If you would like Jason and me to come out, speak to a men's event, come to a business, and just you found some inspiration in our podcast, please reach out to us at the Jonathan Project Podcast at gmail.com, the Jonathan Project Podcast at gmail.com. Jason, good to see you, man. How are you doing?
Hey, bro. It's good to see you.
Yes.
First, I want to say, hey, thank you very much to the Brock family who are listening to our podcast.
All right.
So Pat is a good friend of mine. We were together on ODA and been longtime friends. He is big time listening to it, and he said his wife is fully bought in. So I do appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
And also to Sam, who sent us the email.
That's right. Shout out to Sam.
He said, and at the end of it, I don't know if you checked it out, but he goes, "It's bow time." And I looked at that, and I want to tell Sam that of the basic 5 love languages, that's number 6. That's fried chicken to me, and that spoke very heavily to me. So I will tell you that. I was like, did that just say that? That's awesome. So
It did.
Yes.
So lots of love and support out there. We do appreciate all the prayers, thoughts of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jason, what are we going to spend some time sharing with our friends that are listening out there today?
So journeys, we talk about journeys, and I was kind of thinking about it, and we talk about in our journeys, we talk about persecutions and so forth, right? Because we always measure the success, the summit, and then everything it takes to get there. But everything it takes to get there is kind of critical. And I thought about those journeys and like, why have a journey? Why doesn't God just move us from summit to summit, right? Like good time to good time. And, I got to thinking about that. And actually, one of the things that made me stop and think about it is I was watching a TV show. I can't remember which one it was or whatever it was, but I was sitting there, and I'm horrible at watching TV shows because the character, I'm horrible. The character went from one moment, like they said something, and it was like, and then it fast forwards to another, and I'm like, what happened right after that awkward moment? Like there's no cue in that. They just go, oh, from here, and then there's somewhere else. Yeah. It's like what went on.
Yeah.
And it made me think about journeys. And it also made me think about in 2 Timothy, basically, if you live a godly life and you're following Jesus Christ, you're going to face some persecution. You really are.
Yeah.
You've elected to be on the side of the team that is against the prince of this world. So you're going to face persecution. You're going to face hard times. And I thought about that. Does God want us to be happy? We talked about that. Sure, he does. Sure. Wants us to be happy. But that's not the main goal. We've talked about it. He wants a relationship with him, holiness, and he wants you to know, wants me to know, wants everybody to know that he is God.
Yeah.
Right? And so we talk about journeys, and that's kind of what I was thinking.
No, I like that, Jason. We've all gone through something in life, and if we're honest, we didn't always see the lesson until we got to the other side and had some time to reflect. I think about like this funny thing. Like if you go to a party, if you're at a place and you tell them, hey, I don't drink alcohol, people will grill you. They will go through and like, oh, how many DUIs did you get, or what happened? Did you strangle the pet lizard, or what happened? But if I tell them like, hey, I don't drink water, I just drink Diet Cokes all day, no one would blink an eye, and
that is pretty funny. Yeah.
But I had to learn myself with, why I stopped drinking. Well, one of it was like, some of the stuff I had dealt with, just through life, it was self-medicating. Yeah. But it was going through the journey of growing and learning and understanding what you've gone through, right? Those steps, right? Not just the instant movie. We're at one scene and we're at the next, and then everything is sunshiny. That journey, right? It means something. And God had a lot to say about the path that we take. The Bible is just full of journeys. I think about Abraham, he left everything to follow God. Exodus, where the Israelites are coming out of Egypt. That is nothing but a journey, right? And
Yeah.
it turned into a 40-year, kind of like the Bad Gilligan episode, from a 3-hour tour to a 40-year tour.
Yeah.
David from shepherd to king, and then Paul's missionary journey. So I think about like this verse here, 2 Corinthians 3:18. We all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory and being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is spirit. The journey is about a transformation, not just reaching the destination. So I'm looking forward to just continue to dive in that, because it's something that's very relatable for us. But
Yeah.
we can get focused on, I started the journey, I'm going through something, versus understanding it's just as much as how you transform and when you get to that destination that God is concerned about.
Yeah. No. So let's be candid. Is everything in life good? No. No, it's not. But Romans 8:28 still exists. And it says that everything comes together for good, right? Yeah. Everything works together.
Yeah.
And God sees the everything. We don't see the everything. And, when I thought about that, who's good? Who's good? Well, in reality, our journey can be for us. It can be for others solely. And it can be a combination of for us and other people. If it's our journey, then it's only for us. Maybe like C.S. Lewis says, pain is God's megaphone. Maybe he's trying to get our attention. There's examples of that in the Bible. But even when it isn't, and maybe it's for other people, and we may not know that. But on these journeys, I looked at a couple of things. Sometimes we have fear, right? Fatigue. We're tired. Hey, as you and I have talked about this podcast, and we always try to give a shout out to anybody that says something, but we're called to be faithful. We don't look at how many people are listening to this thing, because we did once and people had a lot to say.
Yeah.
Not positive, but maybe you're tired, or maybe, those long journeys create those feelings of isolation.
Yeah.
And, and all those things can impact our faith. When you talked about Exodus, I love the story of Exodus. By the way, little hidden secret, the Charlton Heston 10 Commandments, absolute favorite movie of all time. It is. It's my favorite.
It is a great movie. Like, yeah, it's just that quintessential biblical movie.
Yeah. So, and when you tell people that, what's your favorite movie? I'm like, it's absolutely this one. It's made in the 1950s.
Yeah.
But you and I both know I have an old soul.
Yes, you do.
When you look at that, I love chapter 13, verse 17. And it says when they got ready to leave, and I won't read you the King James Version, but it says when they got ready to leave, God led them. He didn't lead them through the land of the Philistines, although it was near. Like, it was the shorter route.
Yeah.
He led them around, and it took longer, because it says if they'd went into war, they'd have turned back. And I think about that. As a matter of fact, he takes them to the Red Sea. And when it talks about that in verse 14 or chapter 14, he takes them to the Red Sea, and he goes, hey, this is the way you're going. And they get there. So they've seen the plagues. The plagues didn't affect them. They saw all the miracles. They saw all the positives. When they got ready to leave, Colby, people were giving them stuff. Hey, I'm giving you gold rings. I'm giving you all this gold, so you ain't got to stop. Yeah. Like, I need you to keep going.
Just
in
get out of
today's term, I'm going to give you a full tank of gas. Tires are checked. Oil's changed.
Keep moving.
Yeah. Don't let the brake slow you down. Get out. And so there they were. And they get to the Red Sea, right? And God says, all right, I want you to part the waters. And he talks about why. He says, he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart. And he says, Pharaoh's going to chase after you. And it says here in verse 4, he says that the Egyptians may know that I am God. He wanted them to know. Now in candidness, the guys who were at the bottom of the Red Sea, they figured that out pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But God called them through. And it says they crossed on dry land. Now, I don't. I'm pretty curious as to why that's included, and maybe one day I'll get to ask. I got a question.
No, yeah, it's one of those questions. I think, one of the great lessons out of, the Exodus story that I always took out, and it was just listening, and maybe even part of that Ten Commandments movie where they're talking about the leeks and the meat and all this stuff that they had back in Egypt. And it was this constant sense with the Israelites, which are just a picture of us today. We can sit back and judge the ancient Israelites, but we're the same, where it's you're not comfortable not knowing. And when you're on a journey, which most of our lives are just a bunch of series of journeys that kind of get slapped together. But if you really think about it and you're honest, there's a lot you don't know. I mean, I think about some of the stuff that, I've gone through and continue to go through. It's like, I don't know that next step. And that can be very uncomfortable. But I think about something that, I've shared with my son, and I know you've shared, is you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And trusting God is going to sometimes place you in places that are going to be uncomfortable. When they were facing the ocean and the world's superpower, the greatest military that was on the planet at the time, the Egyptian army, and they're caught in that proverbial hard spot and, in a rough place, that's not comfortable.
No.
But God, pulled them through when, they were suffering under the taskmaster's whip. It wasn't comfortable, but God was looking for them to trust and to cry out. So faith means stepping into the unknown. And that is a really important point. We often want all those answers, but God calls us to walk step by step. He sometimes just gives you enough light in the darkness to take one more step. And you have to be understanding of that.
It feeds back into that relationship. God wants a relationship with you.
Yeah.
He really does. And he also said, hey, I'm going to prove to the Egyptians that I'm God. He really does. I think that dry land, now think about it. That water had been setting on that ground, the bottom, right? For, I don't know, since time began, right?
Sure.
Every single water molecule, when God said time to go, it left. Like all of it.
Yeah.
All of it. It wasn't a bit of mud. It's dry.
Right.
And God has a plan. When you have a relationship, and I think back to, anybody that guides you through darkness, especially in tumultuous times, fearful times, right? Whether it be combat situations or lost in the woods or whatever, it's a unique relationship. You develop that trust and going forward. You're right. We don't know. Isaiah plainly says, God tells him, says, my thoughts are above your thoughts. My ways are above your ways. And you don't know them. And even with God leading Israel around in the Exodus, it was, hey, they didn't know where they were going. He just led them around, right?
No, you're right. But I think that's the thing, Jason, is, and I think about, a story that I would share with you, or, you experienced this, when my youngest daughter was a baby. And we were stationed there in Huntsville, and I had to take her to the hospital multiple times. And the last time we took her, I remember she was absolutely like blue. As we raced over the mountain there trying to get to the hospital, and we didn't know. We really didn't. They were working with her and trying to get her oxygen levels back up. But we knew that the Lord had been faithful to give us this child, right? And there was multiple scares, to be quite honest, like during the whole pregnancy with her, but God just kept showing up and giving us the confirmation that we needed, and now she's a healthy, spunky 10-year-old or 9-year-old, thinks she's 35 in her mind.
Yeah.
Share that story is that, again, we want those answers. We want to know, like, hey, what's going on right now? And it's so hard. It's so hard in being so honest. Like, when we're in those moments when the bottom just feels dropped out, when you're in that moment where the world got turned upside down suddenly, to want to know, want to do, and want to take off and do something. But, I think about my favorite verse here of late, and I have it on a little band that I'm wearing. It's Psalms 46:10. Just be still and know that he's the Lord. Or Exodus 14:14, the Lord will fight for you. You only have to be silent. So sometimes you have to take that example of just being comfortable for a moment in absolute chaos and uncertainty, because the Lord is going to show up when we lean into him.
And we all go through journeys. We do. Take a look at Peter's journey. Jesus looked at him and said, you know what? You're going to deny me 3 times. Hey, big boy, I appreciate those biceps you got going on and that quick temper to cut that guy's ear off. And I know you got a strong back. You're going to pull, I got you. I bet he could deadlift. I like the deadlift. I bet he could deadlift.
Pete probably could get it on in the gym.
He probably could, right? And he goes, you're going to get punked. He didn't tell him, but he says, no, you're going to deny me. And he just kind of leaves it at that. By the way, 2 of those denials was when females had called him out. Yeah. Which was quite the ego blow, I'm sure. He went through a journey. Yeah. And so when you look at Peter later in life, like John Mark, when he kind of bailed out on Paul's ministry and things like that, and Peter took him in. Peter knew what it was like to go through hard times, and that meant something. In 1 Corinthians, it talks about we all have gone through these challenging times, and it says 10:13, there's no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. And I stopped right there. Like, we've all gone through it. And so maybe when we go through it, it's to strengthen somebody else.
Yeah.
Maybe God's going to put you at a point later for your ministry, and everybody has a ministry. Your journey is part of it.
Yes, sir.
I've had people go, I don't really have a ministry. And I'm like, you seem to be breathing. You seem to be a Christian. You got a ministry.
Yeah, you have a story. As my grandmother would say back in the day, they call it, you have a testimony, right? We all have that, right? And, another one I think about is David's life journey. I think, we often equate to David, and I thought about this, especially here recently. He's one of my favorite, and I will always encourage every man should go and study David, because every time you go back, it's something else. And I pulled this out this time. So often in the world, we look at David's journey like, he was the giant slayer. Mm-hmm. And even the secular world has written books about, David and Goliath and him being the giant. But to me, that wasn't his greatest crowning moment of faith. What I'll say was in that cave. And the journey where he had been running, he had been promised to be the king, and the king is in there relieving himself. And David has every ability, every talent, every skill to wipe him out. And when you're faced with that hard choice, when that journey finally leads you to the place where you feel like you can reach out and take what you want, but the Lord really hasn't put you in the place to take it and to be in that spot, that's hard. That's where faith, that's why this man was called a man after God's own heart. Because I guarantee you there was a supreme test, and heaven was watching like, are you going to take it for yourself?
Yeah.
Or are you going to wait for me to give it to you? Right?
Yeah.
Look, and we have to wait for that sometimes. So faithfulness in those small things leads to greater responsibility. 1 Samuel 16:11, 17:34-35. Right? We have to be mindful of those kinds of things when we're going through something in life. Don't just be rushing ahead of the Lord, because it could lead to absolute disaster.
When Saul was in that cave, right, and David, he goes in there to relieve himself. His pants are down.
Yeah,
right? Literally. And David's there. I got 3 words for you: surprise, speed, and violence of action. All of those were available.
And that'll carry the day 99% of the time.
Oh, it 100% carries the day. It really does. Those that are listening know those 3 words and know what they mean. He had every one of those. And it was a golden opportunity. But he didn't do it, and so you're right. You're right. As we go through these journeys and people are, I think there's a couple of things. So sometimes the journey's for us, right? And we've kind of hit the subject like, okay, you're a benevolent human and you're going through this and you're suffering through this because it's just your turn, right? And so forth, right? But also, if you take a look at Hebrews in chapter 12, verses 7, it says, if you endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? In other words, you get after your own kids. And sometimes when we go through it, and not in every situation, but you got to ask yourself, am I out of fellowship with God? Mm-hmm. Is this to drive me back to God? You know, you and I talked in last, I don't know, a couple of days ago or something. We were talking about what it was like to grow up. And because I had removed I'd cut a bunch of peach tree limbs. Now, my parents are going to hear this, and I'm going to apologize. I'm probably going to get a phone call later. Yeah. But the truth is when peach tree limbs have those little knots on them, and man, that was a course corrector, especially on the fat kid's legs here in the summertime, right?
Yeah.
Man, you know,
different times. I remember.
Yeah, I wasn't dressing up like a tiger or a zebra. I just had those stripes, but I'm sure out of love, right? 100% out of love. But in knowing me, I probably needed it. I absolutely needed course correction.
Yeah.
And you know, and God did that with Israel. You know, he was very interested in their heart. We talked about it politically. We talked about it everywhere else. God wants that relationship with you, and he wants you to be holy. He wants you to be righteous. His eyes are on eternity. All of this is little bitty steps to get there. And just like when my youngest was little, he required course correction. And you know him, Colby. You know the little operator. He still requires course correction. And we talk about it because he's not a full-grown adult. You know? But I will say it's easier when he and I have a better relationship.
No, you're right, and I think that's a great point as far as using children as an analog of how the Lord relates to us. Is that, you know, when we accept Him, you get a new birthday, right? You're born again, and people can kind of just hand wave over that. But there is a process that will go all the way until we are on the other side, where we actually can be perfected, and we're never going to be perfected on this side of eternity. And so as you continue to grow, or you should be growing, Jesus talks about it, you know, you should move from, right, and being spiritually immature to being mature, where you're eating solid food, so to speak, and you're growing. Well, that process is going to have, unfortunately, a pruning process, right? And one of the greatest sermons I heard was like, there's storms, right? There's, you know, adversary, Satan-inspired storms. There's self-generated inspired storms where we're sinning and we're out of fellowship. And then there's God that's trying to get us to move to another level. And, you know, and trusting God means embracing those seasons of uncertainty while He's at work, right? His ways are not our ways. Going around the Red Sea, through the wilderness, you know, you're like, man, where are we going? You know, are we there yet? And it's because He knew I need to offload some mindsets and some people if I'm going to grow you into a nation and get you into their full purpose. Abraham, you know, these biblical journeys and these lessons, right? Abraham walking by faith and not by sight. That's the reason why he's in the Hall of Fame of faith. I can't imagine, Jason, leaving my family and everything I know because I had this vision and this conversation with a God that's not my father's God. But faith is an action. It's not just this vacid belief into the void like a lot of people believe Christians are. It should be put into action. And sometimes, if we're honest, and even if we can't understand this point, that action is when you're going through something, and that path and that journey that you walk and you got on the other side, that's just not for you. That was your faith being grown. And sometimes it's going to call us out of those comfort zones for greater purposes. Here's a one for you. I know you love Elijah, right?
Yeah.
A tremendous man of faith, right? And he had great moments of faith, but he also had some really real moments we can relate to, great moments of fear, hiding in the wilderness after this woman named Jezebel was about to get it and tear it out the flame.
Love this.
You know, but it's dependence on God is essential when we're going through these trials. And then ultimately, to turn it back over to Jason as we think about these lessons and stuff, is Jesus. He left heaven, was born into absolute poverty, the King of Kings and the Lords of Lords, the all creation. And he demonstrated every single day the greatest journey of life leading up to his death on the cross. And the greatest thing is the resurrection and the life that came. And he asked us to walk with him and to trust him because he has gone through and he's gone to the other side and says, hey, it can be done. Through my strength, it can be done, and to lean into him. Yeah.
So I like how you glossed over Elijah. I really do. I like how you glossed over that moment where he's had some successful times and all this other stuff. And then he's like, this woman makes me afraid. Let's really dig into that. I know we're limited on time, but this is
that's
worth
okay. Let's dig into
it. So there's this discussion about who do we follow, Baal or do we follow God? And so there's like these, I don't know, 400 priests or something.
It was 400 priests of Baal, Jezebel's key men there.
Yeah, and they're up there and they built all this altar and they're out there cutting themselves and chanting and going crazy. And Elijah just kind of steps up and goes, "Hey, man, you think he's asleep? Better yet, you think he's going to the bathroom? I bet he's on a bathroom break. Y'all chant a little bit louder. I'm going to go sit out over here in the shade." And so he clowns them.
Yeah.
He absolutely clowns 400 people who are so committed that they're cutting themselves.
Yeah.
Like how you would kind of think that is a self-correcting mistake on your worship, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't do it. They were like, I got to do some more. Idiots. But so anyway, and I mean that in a clinical sense. So they do that. And he goes, I tell you what, just so we're clear, I'm one dude. I'm just going to pray. I want you to dump all the water you can on this thing. And I want you to dump more and more and more and more and more. And God, he calls down, ask God, and God brings down the fire. And if I got to go back and look. I wish we talked about this before I could know it. As much as I study the Bible, I still miss certain things. But I think the rocks were even gone. Like enough.
Yeah, the fire from heaven consumed not only his altar, but it leapt up all the water and consumed the priest of Baal's little altar.
Yeah, it got them all.
I think it even got some of them, if I can remember correctly.
I think it may have gotten the rocks, which is a lot of heat.
It's a lot of it was some smoke coming down.
It's it's God showing up saying, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but he's telling them he is God," which is part of the journey. Yeah. And then Jezebel goes, "I'm going to kill him," and he runs off.
Yeah.
So I think about, and you said something. We used to have testimony night at churches, and a lot of those old kind of rural churches, be like, anybody want to give a testimony? And I don't think it's as complicated as where God says, where you tell how you came to accept Jesus Christ. I think it's almost as easy as going, these are the answered prayers, And so that's a big part of my prayer life. You and I talk.
Yeah. That
prayer journal, like every night I give thanks to the healing of a buddy of mine, his wife. They had, she was diagnosed with cancer and she's in remission. I got two buddies that's happened.
Sure.
And so I give a lot of thanks for that. And I give thanks for their friendship. I give thanks for your friendship. But I go through those. I give thanks for even like our oldest came in from Auburn and she made it safely back. And that's an answered prayer. It really is. I give thanks where my wife took a trip with her brother and our nephew for a school trip several hours away. And that return, those are calling out where God has been faithful. And God is faithful. He's faithful when we're not. There's tons of examples of that in the Bible and tons of that in our lives. So whatever journey we're going through, it is, right? The ultimate journey, and you hit it, was Jesus came here. He didn't do anything to deserve the cross. And when you look at when he talks about the cross, and I love where Peter goes, far be it. It's just the King James version of saying, no, absolutely, we don't do this, right? And he says, get thee behind me, Satan. He calls him the devil. He goes, that's the way of the devil. Listen, I got to go be persecuted because the resurrection comes.
Mm-hmm.
Any of our journeys, there is a resurrection moment. The Bible speaks of the resurrection. Now, that may be at the end of our life, or it may be at this right here. But I promise you, all things work together for some good. And
No, I 100% agree with you, Jason. And I guess my final thought would be for the episode is just that change is a constant in life. And the Lord uses those transitions and those moments really to help foster our relationship with him and really to bring us into the purpose that he has brought us into this world, because no one is brought here without a purpose. As much as maybe some may believe that, or they've been told that, that's not the case of what the King has to say about you. And so, I leave with this is when we're going through hard times, and this is a verse that is hung over my doorway and something I remind my kids with every day is Joshua 1:9. Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So as we go through these journeys today, tomorrow, in the future, these hard times, these times where you're being pushed out of a comfort zone, these times where you're being asked to have your faith and what you believe as far as what the Lord can do stretched, be strong, be courageous, because the Lord is there walking with you.
No, that's excellent. Those are excellent points. I'll tell you, for kind of my closing thought is, as a Christian, we are in this constant journey of becoming more like Christ. That's what a Christian is, like Christ, right? Don't forget that journey involved a whole lot of stuff, to include the cross and the resurrection. So for men or women out there, or young adults or kids that are listening, you may be going through something, but this time will pass. There'll be a resurrection moment, a time where that healing is taking place, and just kind of offer that encouragement as we move forward.
Well, folks, that was yet another great episode from the Jonathan Project Podcast. This episode and every episode comes out every Tuesday at 6 a.m. on your favorite podcast platform. That could be Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple, YouTube, you name it. You can probably find us there. Also, if you are looking for prayer, you're wanting to know about our availability for speaking engagements, or just you name it, you're interested about the Jonathan Project and what we got going on, please reach out to us at the Jonathan Project Podcast at gmail.com. Again, the Jonathan Project Podcast at gmail.com. Jason, thank you so much for your time, your friendship and fellowship, and I will talk to you again soon.
All right. See you, brother.